r/askreddit. Serious, to anybody who likes exploring abandoned rundown places, what was the scariest thing that has ever happened to you on your adventures? Me and two of my friends were exploring some woods on the outskirts of my city when we were around 12-13 years old. These woods had old barracks and that were used during World War II but are completely abandoned, overgrown and run down now. To actually get to any explorable barracks you had to go quite deep into the forest and up some very steep hills in which you use the trees' roots that grow down them to climb up. This was the first time me and my friends had ventured this deep before, so all were pretty excited at seeing how far we could go and how big the place actually was. Eventually, we came to a crosspath and we chose to go down the right side. We had to squeeze our way through some tight stinging nettle bushes, but luckily we all had long clothes on to protect us. We stumbled out into this huge clearing area where right in front of us was a huge building that had a massive entrance in the side. We were all astounded as we didn't realize any buildings this big were in this forest and we hadn't seen any real abandoned places before. Of course we decided to go in and check it out, and inside it stretched quite deep and was very dark. Being young we were all pretty nervous to actually set foot any further than where the natural light from the opening spread to. We hung around the entrance for a bit, messing around, echoing our voices and such. Eventually one of my friends is looking off into the darkness with a very frightened expression on his face. Me and my other friend turned to him to ask him what's the matter, and he says, "Guys, I swear I just saw a face or something in the dark over there." Me and my friend, thinking he is trying to just spook us out, tell him to stop messing with us, we aren't falling for his tricks. That's when it happened. The loud scream of an adult male fills the entire building, amplified by the echo. With that, me and my friends look at each other absolutely terrified and let out shrieks ourselves. We bolted towards the bushes in which we came and start making a break straight back the way we came without looking back. We must have run for a solid 10 minutes straight without even stopping. Those huge steep hills I spoke about earlier, we literally jumped down and just slid down them, getting covered in dirt. We finally reached the edge of the forest and stopped running. We never did find out who was in there or why, but considering how young I was, it was definitely one of my most terrifying experiences. Edit. That event stopped me from going back there for a very long time. However, as I got older I eventually plucked up the courage to go back. I had told all my friends about this experience, and so we decided to go there with a much larger group, 10+. It took us a while to actually find the place again, as the forest is kinda like one straight path where you gotta choose your location to move down off the hills to find the abandoned bunkers barracks. When we found the place we were more equipped with flashlights and stuff. We went in and took a look around and didn't see anything out of the usual. My guess is, like people said, probably a squatter scaring us off with a man-bear pig. This is what I came here for. Deep in the forest. No reason anyone should be in that building. Loud scream. I would love to know the story behind who that was. This was when I was a kid, maybe 12-13, back when me and my 4 cousins were little hellions. They lived out on a ranch and we would ride 4-wheelers to a bunch of abandoned buildings in the country all the time. One time we came across a bridge and decided to stop and enjoy the view. It was a beautiful day, I should mention. Sun was shining, birds were singing, and the water in the river looked amazing rushing under the bridge. Then we noticed something strange. There is a metal wire tied to the rail of the bridge and hanging down into the water. Of course curiosity got the best of us, so we decided to pull it up and see what it was all about. We pulled up a deer skull. A huge one too, with large antlers and everything. Mind you, this is not within the timeline of hunting season at all. Then my cousin says, "Look over there, we see what looks like an axe stuck in the middle of a tree stump down by the river." We walk to the end of the bridge and hike our way down to the river, and lo and behold, this is not an axe. It was a deer's leg that had been chopped off and stuck in the dead center of the tree stump, pointing straight up at the sky. We rushed back to the top of the bridge and decided there was no way a deer died by itself and put its leg in a tree stump and tied its skull to a metal wire. We come to the realization that someone is hunting out of season. Suddenly, as 2 of my cousins are discussing whether to take the head with them or not, they thought it was super cool but it smelled absolutely horrible. We see some hillbilly looking men step out onto the porch of a house up on the hill. They are holding rifles. They see that we've pulled up the wire with the deer skull and start running down the hill at us. We never rode our four-wheelers so fast. We booked it out of there. We made it back to the ranch and told our parents about it. One method to clean up a skull for mounting is to tie it to a string or wire and leave it submerged in water for up to a year. That part, at least, it's easily explained. Finding 150 barrels of toxic waste illegally dumped in the Packard plant in Detroit. I stayed there too long without a respirator. I had a bad headache and felt spacey for the rest of the day. I also lost about 70% of my sense of smell permanently. That was your penance for disturbing the olfactory. Owner threatening to beat the shit out of us because he thought we were after copper. Dude was actually pretty chill when he realized we were dumb teens and not meth heads, but he did force us to give over our backpacks to make sure we didn't have spray paint or tools. Ghosts probably see a lot of meth heads. Now let me inspect your penises and balls. And no funny business. There used to be this abandoned asylum in the woods by the park near the house where I grew up. The main building above ground had been torn down, but the basement was still there and you could enter it through a small window that was just big enough to crawl through. The furniture and some medical stuff was all still down there. I was too afraid to go through the window, but my friend wasn't. He was down there for about 5 minutes before he screamed and jumped out of the window. He said something was chasing him. We could hear it down there scurrying around, but none of us wanted to get close enough to the window to look with the flashlight. A few years later, a woman got attacked near there by a gaze of aggressive raccoons. Naughty children get sent to the raccoon asylum. About 10 years ago, I was exploring an old rundown hotel in my city with some friends at about 3 AM. The property owners were having serious troubles with squatters, so they had put razor wire everywhere. I was wearing thin jeans. I was 18 and stupid. I tripped on some steps and thought some of the razor wire had just caught on my jeans. We keep going and get inside. Soon I realize my leg is wet. And I don't just mean wet, it is soaked from the knee down. It's dark as hell, so my buddy shines his flashlight on my leg and it turns out it's blood. I have to drop my pants in front of everyone to see where it's coming from. Right above my knee is this little cut, squirting blood. We all start cursing. One of the girls pukes and has to turn away. Fortunately, my buddy, incidentally the one with the flashlight, takes off his belt and sweatshirt and makes a pressure pack for it and gets me to lay down with my leg above my head for a bit. After a while we decide we have to hike out of there and quick before security comes back for their rounds. So we tighten the belt and we hike out of there. I had to take my pants all the way off because I didn't want to rip them over the sweatshirt. So here I am walking out of this hotel and into the subsequent neighborhood to where our car was parked in my boxer briefs holding my leg, soaked in blood from the knee down. Ended up going okay, sewed it up at home with help from dude with the flashlight. He was a nifty friend to have around. TLDR, break into a hotel, trip over razor wire, don't realize it's bad until we're all the way in, have to hike out in no pants. Have good friends. Your friend should be a paramedic. If they can do that without training, imagine how helpful they can be with training. Edit, most upvotes I have ever gotten. Don't know how I feel about that. Imagine the looks on the faces of the next group of explorers who venture to that hotel and find a book of bloodstains and bloody footprints on the floor. 2 times out of the 100 or so adventures have ended in a scary situation. There's an abandoned hospital here that I explored a lot. I even spent the night in there a few times. It was incredibly intimidating from the outside and not many people had the balls to go in back then. One night I went in with a couple friends and we saw a sleeping bag on the ground that appeared to have a person in it. And one of the friends who had joined, complete idiot, thought it would be a good idea to kick the sleeping bag and see if someone was in it. Sure as shit, someone was in it. He jumped out of the sleeping bag, screaming at us, no words just screams, and chased us out of there. The second time, I was at an abandoned factory. Huge factory. I had also been there a few times previously. Made it inside. Started taking photos. And then my friend asked if I could hear someone running. We waited and listened for a minute, and the running kept getting louder and closer. So we got out before we found out who it was running. Or why they were running. The second story runs like a horror movie, but one where the protagonists are idiots. I came across a very old, very smashed up VW bug in a ravine in the woods. It had been there a long time since it was half buried in the mud. I started poking around the site and found dozens of old school style ladies' stockings, many tied together and disintegrating, scattered around. I found old Kodak film developing canisters. I found a bag of cement completely hardened among other things. Plus a year before I had found a very old ice pick close to the site. I got the chills and became a bit concerned. I had posted about this on Reddit years ago, but the general consensus was that the chassis was missing and it was just someone's garbage dump. But I still wonder about it. So much of the bug was scattered about and buried in mud. It was just so weird. Edit. To add a few more details, the bug is in North Carolina. Late 50s early 60s orange convertible I think. The ice pick says Middletown Ice and Coal, company phone 25453. I have posted this to a couple other askreddit questions, but anytime this type of question comes up I always go back to growing up in a small rural New England town and as a kid would always venture into the woods and find neat old things. My dad noticed that I was really interested in exploring and finding old things near our land, so one day asked if I wanted to go see something that no one else he knew had known about. I jumped at the chance and we drove off into the mountains and parked on the side of the road. We got out and walked into the woods for what felt like 45 minutes and we came across this really small cemetery. There had to be 10 or so stones and you couldn't really make out anything on them, but a couple of them that read something like 1802. 1803, and 1803, 1805. My dad said he stumbled on it as a kid and it must have been a small family cemetery. It just kind of broke my heart thinking about how many of those stones were probably infant toddler. This was a few years ago, but there was an abandoned cookie factory in my city. We found out if we walked down some train tracks you could get in through an unlocked side door. So me and two other guys went exploring. We entered the basement and wandered through. It was obvious people had been there before by the shitty Hail Satan graffiti tags all over what was a locker shower room. Anyway, we come to a ladder going up to the next floor and I proceed to go up it and realize when the company left the building they had sectioned this portion of the building off. The ladder went up and had a curved rung on it, so they had taken a large piece of plywood and cut holes in it to fit in through the rungs and laid it on the floor to block it off. I get to the top, lock my legs on the ladder and push hard on the plywood and it comes up. There on the floor about 6 inches in front of my face was a glass orb. It was reflecting, there in the darkness. I'm looking at my own face and what I can make out with my light. I just stayed there for a minute expecting something to come out of the darkness and tear my fucking face off and pull me up the ladder. So I took a breath, lifted the plywood, slid underneath onto the floor and assumed the fucking Wolverine stance, like that was going to save me from the deranged murder ghost of the abandoned cookie factory. The two guys I was with get up the ladder and we look around. We found a 6-foot tall T-Rex and toys and all kinds of stuff. Old children's museum exhibits. By this point if you live in my city, you most likely know where I was. The cookie factory had a nearby children's museum and they held old exhibits for the museum in one of the empty wings in the factory, maybe for a tax break or something. I guess since the factory shut down, they blocked that part off and hoped they'd forget about it. Bonus story, we went back with a larger group, which isn't a smart idea because you make more noise obviously, and we heard someone shouting at us. With us was a friend of mine who was about 6'3" and 300 pounds. Another guy had a gun on him just in case as well. So we're not really worried, but this is also not somewhere that you want to draw attention to yourselves. So we decided we'd better leave as we hear this person banging shit and cursing at us. We get out and keep walking and we finally see the person in question. Little crackhead in a purple Vikings jersey with a squeaky voice who was probably just trying to ride a high in peace. Place looked totally abandoned, run down shit and trash everywhere. Opened this one door and there was some huge guy masturbating to his big ass TV. You can't unsee something like that. A few months ago I was cruising around Chattanooga with my sister and a friend. We were on the side of town with this factory some people had told us was a pretty cool old place to check out, so we decided what the fuck, let's kill some time there. Anyone from the area might be familiar with it. It's the old central soil factory off of Amnicla, and there are several videos online of people exploring it. Our first mistake was going through the gate. It was the obvious way in, so we merrily traipsed down the road and onto the property. It's the middle of the afternoon, so it's bright and sunny, and the wind is blowing so we can hear loose metal banging around up ahead. We pass the silos and end up in the loading dock kind of area. Pretty much every square inch is covered in graffiti, so we wander around there for a minute. Once we enter the building, there's a pitch black hallway to our right. Fuck that, we stay in the loading area and go up to the second floor. My friend is walking ahead of us, and he stops at the top of the stairs to look around before rushing us back down. Apparently the entire upstairs was trashed, littered in papers and blankets and empty cans. What spooked him was the room at the far end. The half-open door started to swing wider when he looked at it, and he couldn't see anything farther than that. We got back to the main floor, creeped out and ready to leave, when we hear a voice whisper, "Hey," nothing else, but at that moment the wind stopped and the whole place went dead still, demon possession horror movie style. We noped the fuck out of there, and as we were heading back to the gate we found a message. "I can see you," was painted on the asphalt, and when my friend and sister looked back they both saw a man walk past one of the windows. Apparently he turned to stare at us for a moment before gliding out of sight again, and even though I didn't see him we all still had chills hours later. We've talked about going back with more people and better flashlights, but so far no one is that enthusiastic about it. I was exploring an abandoned mine in the Mojave. I was pretty far in, climbing down ladders and exploring old rooms. I saw old newspapers, break rooms, clothes and unexploded dynamite in the walls. Something spooked me and I turned around fast to run. I hit my head on the rock, broke my headlamp and knocked myself out. I came to, I was wet, cold and it was pitch black. Like no light at all, black. I tried my headlamp, didn't work. Tried my backup, didn't work. Flashlight was also dead. I was seriously beginning to get really scared. I continued searching my backpack. I found several odd shapes not usually in it. It was Halloween chain lights that my kids had put into my backpack. I tore the first one open and cracked it. Beautiful green light everywhere. I recognized where I was and made my way out. I surveyed myself. I had a gash in my head about 3 inches long. I was covered in blood and mud. I drove to urgent care down in Victorville. I ended up with 13 staples in my head. I never went back into a mine alone after that. I did go into Cave of the Winds here in CO on a candlelight tour years later. I was fine until they had us blow out the candles. That trapped fear in that mine came right back. It was all I could do not to panic and GTFO of there. Don't explore old abandoned mines by yourself. Tell people where you are. Have backups of backups of backups and don't rely on freaking batteries.